Welcome back to Extra Literary Affairs, a podcast for the lit curious reader, because why not read a little of everything? I'm Joey Kelly.
And I'm Jennifer Smith.
And today we're having another affair with Jorge Luis Borges and his short story, The Circular Ruins. And this month has been dubbed by me as June of Art, which when I thought of that made me giggle so hard. Okay, Joan of Arc, June of Art. Okay, hilarious. So all month long, we're going to be exploring stories that involve art in one way or another, because both of us love when authors involve some kind of visual art into their work. So we are going to kick off every episode of this month of June with sharing some art that we love. So on the screen, I'll go first, is a painting. Linda's Famed Castle and Abbey, Holy Island by Moonlight by John Moore of Ipswich, and it was painted in 1877. I love when artists in classical paintings incorporate light in a way that makes it look like there is actually a light source in the painting itself. And that is one of them. Jennifer, would you like to share a painting that you like?
Yes, Joey. I love illuminating something that is not illuminated. My favorite painting that is currently in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which I saw for the first time probably back in 2001, is Prometheus Bound, and it is by Rubens. It was created in the early 1600s. So it's 500 years old at this point. And as you know, we have talked in the past about my love affair with Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, the Prometheus myth. All of those things sort of bubbled up for me. So coincidentally, when you said, hey, do you have a piece of art that you would like to talk about in this episode? I'm like, well, you betcha, because Borges has really called that into my mind.
We both love classical art, apparently. Old classical art, that's for me. Contemporary art is hard sell.
Yeah, I'm going to mix it up. Next week, I really think there's going to be a contemporary thing that I saw when I was on a vacation in Phoenix. So I'm hoping to bring him to our attention.
When I say contemporary art, I mean abstract contemporary art. I should be more specific. Where I'm like, this is 2 blocks of color. Hit the bricks. I don't give a shit about this. I just don't find it that interesting. No offense to anybody that paints like that. Go ahead. I'm not your demographic. Since today's story is a quintessential Borges tale that is somehow small and infinitely humongous at the same exact time, I think that we need to give a little bit longer of a summary than we typically do, because it's a kind of a confusing story. Well, maybe it's a little bit more straightforward than some of his other stories, but certainly the first time I read it, I feel like I was confused. I was like, I have no idea what's going on in this story. So I think a slightly longer summary will be helpful to anybody that wants to start reading. And if this is your first time reading Borges, this is a great story to start with.
Well, if this is someone's first introduction to Borges, congratulations. You have arrived at something that is a little mind-bending, a little time travel-y, and for me, always confusing. Joey, I have read the story no less than 4 times, and I'm still going, well, that's interesting. I wonder what we're going to talk about. So, Joey, I would love to hear your summary, and then we can build from there.
Okay, this is not my summary. It's actually, someone wrote it on interestingliterature.com, so I'm going to give them props there. This is their summary. A magician has traveled to a land where the circular ruins of an ancient temple are located. At the ruins of the temple, there is a stone statue commemorating some mysterious deity. The statue could be either of a horse or a tiger. The magician sleeps by the ruins, determined to dream a man into existence. In his dreams, the magician is lecturing to a group of students about a range of topics, including anatomy. He gradually dismisses the students from his dreams until only one pupil, who resembles the magician himself, is left, but then he loses the ability to dream and is inflicted with insomnia. He eventually manages to sleep again, this time willing himself to dream a man, one body part at a time. Although this gradual process starts well, the magician realizes he may need divine assistance and seeks this from the ambiguous tiger horse deity commemorated at the temple's ruins. In his dreams, he communicates with this deity, which is revealed to symbolize fire. The deity tells the magician that he can help to realize the man of the magician's dreams, but in return he must hand over the man to him so that he can serve the fire deity. The god also tells the magician that he, the magician, needs to educate and instruct the man first. This takes 2 years until the dreamed man is made real. The magician views him like a son. However, he had been told by the fire deity to send the dream man to another temple, so he reluctantly lets him go, having erased the man's memories first. This way, the man will never know that he is only a product of the magician's dreams, but will believe himself to be a real person. So later, the magician hears that this man he dreamed into existence has the ability to walk on fire without being burned. When a forest fire spreads and engulfs the temple, the man stoically accepts death and walks into the flames, only to realize that he is unharmed and that he, like his son, was dreamed up by someone else and he is not a real person. Okay, that was really long, but I felt like it was necessary because there's so many details in this story, and I had to read it quite a few times too. I understood what was going on by the second time.
So, Joey, when I was reading the story, as that summary beautifully put out for us, it is a circular story. You hear this stranger, and it's interesting because we are reading this in translation. So depending on the translator that you used, there may be the word magician, it may be wizard. So there are like interchangeable words, and I don't know for our audience if that actually makes a difference to them. It starts out with a quote from Through the Looking Glass. So this circular nature, how would you feel as a person if you realized you were just living in a dream, that you never actually existed because you're the dream of someone else? And I thought that was also just this playful. He also in the story says, you know, some people count this time period in days and weeks. Some say it's in years and decades. So again, very quintessential what Borges does with, I'm not going to give you a firm definition of a word. I'm going to be super playful with my language. Time is going to circle around and weave back and forth. And maybe you're an imaginary person and maybe you're not. And maybe everyone imagined everyone else. And that's how you call people into life. So Joey, that's where that was coming from me. And I know we're going to have a very interesting discussion about what we both brought out of this, reminding us of Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. But I would love to kick it back to you to see, did you enjoy this story? Was this a pleasurable experience for you to circle around these circular ruins?
I mean, I certainly do love Borges. I call him my boy all the time, every time I reference him. So yes, I did. I absolutely do love this story. I think it is one of his best stories and is very much him. So if, like we said in the beginning, if you want to start reading Borges and you're like, oh, I don't really know where to start, I think this is probably a better entryway into Borges. It's a good starter story. He is still one of my favorite authors, and it still upsets me that he didn't write a full novel, but I think a story like this shows that he didn't have to do it. It's a complete story from start to finish. We both were saying that we saw Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in this. And I would add to that this movie Inception. Have you ever seen it? It's like Leonardo DiCaprio. I can't remember when it came out. Early 2010 sometime. They go into dreams and then they go into another dream that's in a dream, and it's just like they keep going layers down into dreams. And at the end, spoiler alert, are you going to watch it? Because I'm about to spoil it.
Please spoil it for me, because you know I'll forget and then I'll be surprised when I actually do see it.
Anyway, the ending is very similar to this because Leonardo DiCaprio has a top that he spins, and if it spins perpetually forever, then he knows he's in a dream. But if it wobbles and it falls down, he knows he's in reality. But at the end, he thinks he's in reality and he spins the top. And I'm pretty sure it looks like it's going to sort of wobble and maybe fall down, but we're not sure. And the movie cuts. So we have a similar idea that he is stuck in a dream, just like how this unnamed man is also stuck in a dream, or he thinks he's stuck in a dream, but who could say for sure?
Joey, Borges is not for me. Some days he is, some days he's not. It reminds me of speaking to my dear Argentinian friends that I want to have like a clear-cut, straightforward conversation, and it meanders and the meanings of words change between Spanish and English, and then we circle around to something we talked about earlier, and then we jump into the future, and then we make a reference to some odd painting or some piece of music, and then we come back to what we're talking about, and I'm like, okay, so what just happened here? So it's a pleasurable experience to be swirling around in this dreamlike state. Borges and his translator use such vibrant, beautiful language that you can't help but just go, now that's a sentence. It's just beautiful. But I think for me, the frustrating part is the only direct characteristics about who are these characters. If you think, somebody is called the stranger. Who is that? Is the stranger the magician who appears in this temple? Or is it the son that is created and is imaginary, but then manifests as a real person, but it's really actually also the father? I can't keep my characters straight because I think Borges is intentionally saying it kind of doesn't matter who created whom or who came first. Chicken and the egg. Thank you, Clarice Lispector. The egg and the chicken. It was just very bendy. But what did get my attention, oh, that's interesting. The creator was, as you said, he's like teaching a lecture to a bunch of these creatures that he's put together. They're not quite men yet because he hasn't identified them yet, and they haven't grown their own personalities. And he said something very specific. The idea was, I'm dismissing all of the legions of the people in my class because they all are yes men. Nobody challenged him. He said they were all sweet and capable of love, but nobody challenged me. And it is the person who challenges me and asks questions who is eligible to become a realized person and sent off into the universe. That tracks, right? I think that's a very meta. You can be sweet and lovable and agreeable, but the person who really needs to be the chosen one is the person who's going to ask questions, stir things up, and be eligible to move forward. Did you get that same sense?
I think maybe my expectations are different when I'm going into a Borges story because I'm not so focused on characters because I agree. I don't think the characters don't really matter. The idea behind the story that is more important. So if you're a character motivated reader, then this is probably not the story for you because there's no one to grab a hold of. This is a mysterious person that washes up on shore. Even the indigenous population of wherever he is, they're unseen, they're off page. So the only, interactions he really has is with dream people in his dream and a deity that is fire. So again, we don't have like an actual person with a name. We just have the embodiment of an element of the world. So yeah, it is hard to grab hold of something sometimes in Borges stories, but I think if you go in with a different mindset of, I just want to experience whatever he's going to tell me and just enjoy the story. And also you have to be ready to question what's going on. And I don't mean to you, I mean anybody that's getting into Borges. That's what I think he wants you to engage with his work, is to be like, why is this happening? Where are they coming from? What does all this mean? What could this be symbolizing? That's an important part for me as I'm reading Borges.
I was thinking about, okay, what are some signposts in this story? Because of the information that we were given, we as readers can't even know if, as you said, is this a horse? Is this a tiger? Those are two very different mythological and actual creatures. Well, that's curious. When we're looking at the temple, we can't agree because it is ambiguous what this creature is. So I also like that playfulness. And I like the playfulness of him putting in philosophy and using terms like taciturn. What does that even mean? And so the reason I bring that up is that it comes out in the very first paragraph of the story. And then we're introduced to what he calls his son, his creation. And he says, oh, he's also taciturn. He also has hair like me. He also resembles me. And so that was, for me, also this playfulness of when we create something, many of us will do it in our own image. And when we listen to the creation myths around Christianity, we were formed in God's image. In this story, it's not overtly tied to a specific religion, but it does say that he gets whispers from the deity who's informing what he creates. And I was like, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, the deity itself and the statue that sort of like is just like constantly in motion and is morphing from tiger to horse and then like in a mix of it, and you can never really be sure what it is other than that it's these two creatures at some point. And that for some reason also stuck out to me. Why is that in here? Why is that the representation of fire that he decided to go with? So I looked it up to see, is this an actual deity? Is this like based on something? And I couldn't find anything in any mythologies. I'm not saying that there's not. Borges was genius, so he probably do something super random and esoteric, but I sure couldn't find it in my research from that. So maybe it's not a direct reference to a specific mythology or religion. So then why do this? And so I was thinking about, well, you have a tiger that's a predator and a horse that's a prey animal. So this is a dichotomous representation. You have opposite ends of the spectrum. How could they live as a singular being? And I think it's a good representation of how we interact with fire, because fire can obviously be a deadly force that could burn down a house or a town, or it could burn the world down as it is right now when it's 96 degrees in New Jersey right now. Or it could be manipulated by human beings to cook our food and to warm our houses and stuff like that. So it sort of does make sense when I start thinking about it as a representation. And then when we look at a flame, it is constantly in motion. It's never the same exact shape. It can change colors. It could be straight up if there's no breeze and be like a very traditional looking one, or it could be a very small blue flame, or it can be almost flat because there's a breeze or something. So again, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. It's constantly in motion, but we still know it's a flame, even though when we're looking at it. Yeah, I was just like, well done, Borges. Of course. I don't know where you got it from, just your brain, I guess.
And Joey, I completely agree with you. If it's the horse, it is slow, steady, a tool of mankind for progress. We have horsepower. We have, domesticated animals. We don't really domesticate tigers. They are wild. No. They are vicious. They can attack. When he was making the description of the temple, he also said sometimes it's the color of flame, which again is it orange? Is it blue? Is it a smoky gray? What is the color of the flame? And sometimes it's ash. So it was that feeling of the whole life cycle of and embers, and sometimes it's vicious and sometimes it's just there to warm you. So I really did love that playfulness. And if we go back to Prometheus in my painting, in the painting in our Mary Shelley.
Yeah, my painting.
It's my painting, my favorite painting in Philadelphia.
I painted it 500 years ago.
500 years ago, my spirit animal painted that for my pleasure. That it is the legend, the myth of Prometheus, who famously gave fire to mankind, which is symbolized also as knowledge. He gave the knowledge of how to spark all of these ideas and create the technology that we have today. He was punished for that. And that is the symbol that is in that painting, that his liver is being pecked out by an eagle perpetually, because that was his punishment from Zeus, the almighty god, in that particular myth. And so I just think it was very interesting that Borges takes us to this creation, fire, father-son relationship in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I know we talk about a lot and we will actually read here together at some point, maybe in October, we'll see. There's a huge question of who is responsible for whom. If you create something, are you supposed to be a loving, caring father, or are you like Victor Frankenstein in the novel? And as we know in real life, you can never really run away from what you have created, because it will always find you. And in this particular novel, to horrendous effect. So when I have that in the back of my mind, when I think about this creation myth and this story that Borges is like circling around and swirling, it doesn't end badly, because we're seeing this guy have feelings for who he is calling his son.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Prometheus myth is also talking about infinity, because the idea was for Prometheus to sit there or be chained to the side of the mountain forever. But I think Hercules actually rescues him. It's like one of his labors or something, or he does it while he's doing his labors. But anyway, we're not talking about Greek myth, except for this one. But it's interesting that we have another idea of the infinite here with Prometheus. I'm sure a lot of people read this and think, oh, Frankenstein. Obviously, Frankenstein predated this by quite a long time.
Years prior, which was 200 years after the painting. So, like, we're just having these ripples in time.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people are, like, making that connection. Because, I mean, when a story talks about creating man in some capacity, you immediately think of Mary Shelley, or at least we did. So, yeah, that's interesting that we have another creation story, because obviously you're just saying with Mary Shelley or Victor Frankenstein creating man and then regretting it and doing like the stupidest thing ever, just like running away, whatever. We're not talking about Frankenstein right now. And in the Prometheus myth, one of the things that Prometheus is supposed to have done was help to create humankind. So again, we have another reference to somebody else creating man. If we think about this as the creative process and as like a Victor Frankenstein kind of story to create man, Borges writes in the story that the goal that led him on was impossible, though it was clearly supernatural. He wanted to dream a man. He wanted to dream him completely and painstaking and impose him upon reality. The magical objective had come to fill his entire soul. If someone had asked him his own name or inquired into any feature of his life till then, he would not have been able to answer. And so I think we have another like nod to Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein, because of course Victor has to be all in to this idea of creating man. He's obsessive. And I think a lot of artists end up being very obsessive people, at least for their own craft, because how do you create novels? You have to be obsessed about this process. Well, this is a short story, but in novels or short stories, writing something, creating any of the painting, either of the paintings that we talked about, you have to be obsessed with this. And I think all of these stories that we'll be reading have something to do with obsession as well.
And Joey, I also thought it was quite interesting when you said, in that quote, they reference his soul, right? So that's a very spiritual thing. Is that the spirit of you? Is that your essence? Some people don't like the word soul because that feels more Christian and has other connotations. And the thing that there's, for me, always this playfulness with Borges that he's acknowledging, but he's pushing away. So he was like, okay, the hardest part for him was to enumerate all of the hairs on a person's head. And I think there's something in the Bible, in some of those stories about, God knows every hair on your head. He created that just for you. So there's these echoes and like how many angels can fit on the head of a pin, right? Like an infinite number. So it was just very interesting for me when, we've been doing this for 2 years now. It is not infinity, but it has been a long time.
Yeah.
And
Feels like forever.
It feels like forever in a good way, in such a beautiful way for me, that we often will reference other things we've read or seen or experienced together or separately. And I think that for me is becoming so evident with Borges, is that you can experience it as just the story as it is. It is, as I said, a little bit complicated in my mind. Or you can say, what else do you think he's alluding to? And that creativity, that imagination, we often talk about co-writing stories with an author. And you always tell us that Borges says something to the effect of, doesn't matter if you understand the poetry or not, but if you felt something as a result of experiencing it, you did it correctly. Everything is going as it should. And so that has really been coming up for me, is like, what is the purpose of art? As we're doing our June of Art, what is the purpose of art? Is it tied into literature? Is literature a valid form of art, right? And we talk about the liberal arts, and that's definitely in there. But I think I was in a group over the weekend and we are reading Proust, and the person who was in charge of the group said, okay, I want everyone to close their eyes and listen to someone read this first paragraph, and just with your eyes closed, draw on a piece of paper whatever image comes up. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I didn't do that. And I know where the person brought that. I'm like, my art doesn't come that way. So I'm like, okay, I'll play along. I will listen. But I was writing phrases and words and images, like in words, and not creating them as an art piece. And I just thought that was such an interesting thing when you think about, where does creativity come from? Is there a quote unquote right way to experience this? I think every person's experience, if they're having it and are being honest with themselves about doing it, and it makes them curious about like, well, that was interesting, you've done it correctly. Have you ever had something like that happen, Joey?
Where someone asked me to close my eyes and draw something?
Yeah.
Pictionary. No, not in a book club. No, I do think that's a fun exercise to see like what you would come up with, but it's a good point to say that not everybody sees art in the same way. And as using yourself as the example is to be like, the way that I interpret art is through words and not through images. And that's valid. I think certainly writing is an art. If you're not good at it, and you're not willing to practice with that too, you're never going to be good.
Yeah, and Joey, the flip side of that, which was very interesting, it was because I had to close my eyes. And I was like, well, I can't draw with my eyes closed. Like, I have to open my eyes. But the flip side is true. So I was in an art gallery in Phoenix, and every photograph, every painting, I'm like, let me tell you a story about what's going on here. So again, art is visual, but it leads to storytelling. And I just thought that was quite an interesting thing for me to realize about myself and say, yeah, that's how that goes for you.
Yeah. I think also you were talking about that Borges quote. I don't remember the exact quote that I talk about all the time. I just paraphrased that guy. If you want to read how beautifully he talks about stuff, you should just read him, because I'll never do him justice. But anyway, he also, in addition to the many things that I've talked about, especially the poetry thing, he would say, or he has written that he thinks that writing requires the right reader to bring it back to life. The author is putting in the effort, is putting in this magic, okay, we'll say, for the sake of the story, and then it sort of feels like it goes dormant. and it's words on a page, but it takes the right reader to come along and use their imagination to breathe new life back into it. And I think that's what this story is also showing, is that it's the right person has to come along with that spark of creativity, and to breathe new life into something else. And so, I mean, like, what is art if not, I was gonna get real pretentious for a second. What is art if not like the dream of a dream of a dream of a dream? Like, just layers of dreams of other people's dreams. Someone else's dream was your inspiration. Now you're imagining something else, and then you create this thing in however what medium, and then it goes on and on, hopefully perpetually forever, or at least until the earth explodes.
And then it'll be a beautiful celebration of all the new things. Joey, that was so beautifully said. And thank you for reminding me that that is one of the ethoses that he brings. It's like not every piece is for every reader. And as you said, as it layers into the story, something can be created and lie dormant until the moment where it happens. So when he sends his creature out into the world and he's like, okay, you're done, but the instructions are that you have to go to a faraway temple, so I'll never see you again, and I'm already missing you. But because he loved his son so much, he's like, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna erase the part of your memory that would allow you to understand that you're a figment of my imagination. So I'm just going to undo that part of the program and send you out there. And that gets reflected at the end of the story in that beautiful moment where he was like, wait, I can also walk through fire. And I was told by the fire god that only his son could walk through fire, and that's how he recognizes him. And yeah, it was just, to me, it was just a very beautiful, as you said, a moment where it all came back together, and you're like, well, yes, we're all imaginary.
Yeah, this is not even real. It's the Matrix, guys. No, okay.
But it's not AI. It's real, but not real.
Yeah, but I think that is an interesting idea, is does it matter where you get your inspiration from? Because if we're using this as the creative process or whatever, should it matter that he's aware that he is the dream of another man, who is also the dream of another man, blah, 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 forever and ever? Does it matter because he still had the ability to dream up another man? And I think if I compare this with a creative process, does it matter if you're super inspired by Borges in your writing? I mean, as long as you're not plagiarizing, okay, then that's different. That's copying, not creating. But if you're heavily inspired by Borges, and I don't know who's in my eye line here, Shakespeare and James Joyce. Let's just really be pretentious, Joey. Yeah, let's say you're inspired by those three writers. Does it matter that you know that your inspiration is from these authors? So if you can now take what pieces you love from each of them and create your own thing that's original, again, not plagiarism, should it matter? And I think in the movie Inception, where you're like, damn it, what is going on here? I think that's one of the parts that I'm like, I would like more information. What does this mysterious unnamed man, how does he continue on with his imaginary life? I mean, he's a real person. He shows up. He needs to eat and drink and sleep, and he needs shelter and clothing. So he's not an imaginary man. He was just dreamed first. So does it matter? I don't know.
Joey, I love that so much. So in my future, I would love to see the mashup of James Joyce, Shakespeare, and Borges into a piece of literature. And I was like, won't that be something? Long sentences about infinity that also rhyme. And then somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to get gutted. Somebody's getting gutted in this. Joey, I really love the question that you had is, what's the purpose of creativity? We're never here. You and I, we say this a lot. We are never here to judge what is good and bad about people's writing habits or reading habits or what they enjoy. And so the flexibility to say, this isn't for me, or these are all the things I love about it, I don't understand why you don't, right? We have those conversations sometimes, I can see why you love it, but I also know why it doesn't work for me. I think that is such an important thing for us to remind ourselves of that. You and I are often on the same page with the things that we're reading. We're like, oh yeah, I understand why I like this. But when we are on opposite sides of the enjoyment spectrum, I think it's also great to say, as you often say to me, I love that for you, Jennifer, but that is not for me. But I love that you love it.
Yeah, I think it's good to bring that up, that this story might not be for you, and that's okay, because Borges was not judging, or at least I don't think he was judging when he said, like, you need the right reader, not like you have to be super smart or something like that to keep up with him. He was like, no, literally you don't even have to speak the same language as whatever you're reading. It does not matter, okay? In poetry, at least. I don't know about in prose. In prose, you probably do need to know the language. But anyway, I think when he says the right reader, he means like the reader that's going to enjoy it and spend the time to investigate. Not that you didn't investigate, but like it doesn't mesh well with your reading sensibilities, and that's great. Now you know, don't read this story again, or to avoid other such stories that might be similar.
I'm still going to read it again because even though it was not my favorite thing, again, we talk a lot about like the kaleidoscope. It feels like every time I read the story or look at it in a different way, I get like a different combination of colors and experiences and sensation when I'm reading it. And I was like, okay, that as an experience, if this was I'm only reading this not to comprehend, I'm reading this to experience the discomfort I feel by going like, what? Like, what is the story talking about? Like, are you talking about creation? Are you talking about gods? Are you talking about supernatural elements? Are you talking about superstition? Are you talking about, as you said, like the people who are worthy to move to the next level of existence are those who ask questions and who don't just say they're yes men? Like, he just layers, like it's a 7-layer dip. Like, you can just dip in there and you're going to get something new every time. It's always going to be yummy. You're really going to enjoy it, but it may leave you going like, wait, what did I just do here? Like, what was the story again? At least that was my experience. And Joy, I know you have a more, I think, direct access to the storyline, and you're like, yeah, that all makes really clear sense to me.
Yeah, I bet, like I said at the beginning, I was like lost in the story. I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on here. Who is this? What is this guy doing? What do you mean you're creating a man, like physically? Like, how is this happening? Are you birthing him? But again, like I think we both had to read it a few times because other than the language being itself very beautiful and just an enjoyable experience to read, it does take time to figure out, like parse out what's going on. Who are all the major players here?
So Joey, can I just read at random something off of my iPad here, just to give an example of a typical sentence in this story? So it's 2 sentences. Tracks of bare feet, some figs, and a jug warned him that the men of the region had been spying respectfully on his sleep, soliciting his protection or afraid of his magic. He felt a chill of fear and sought out a sepulchre niche in the dilapidated wall where he concealed himself among unfamiliar leaves. There's a lot going on in those 2 sentences, right? And it's just beautiful and lush, and obviously it was probably more evocative in Spanish, but we are both reading it in English.
Yeah, we have to learn Spanish, okay, just to read this story. Yeah, I think you could really pull out any detail of this story and explore that. Like, for some reason, we both keyed in on the fire deity being a tiger and a horse. I mean, it is kind of strange when you're like, what do you mean? So it's pretty logical that we would both be like, what is this?
So, not related to Borges at all, one of our favorite stories that we have read was Ken Liu. And there's a magical, mystical horse in that story as well that is completely imaginary but comes to life and has a very important impact on the course of someone's life. So I just think it's just kind of interesting that I think people, as you said, you take a germ of an idea wherever it comes to you from, and you take it as far as you, as the reader and the writer together, can take that in an experience.
Yeah, and you can expand on what Borges would not have been able to know because he was dead before this stuff happened. But like, for example, I imagined these circular ruins as spirals. He does not say spirals, but he calls them circular, but I don't care. In my head, they are spirals. And I immediately thought of manga artist and writer Junji Ito. Do I have one of his books? I sure do. Hold on. Oh, is there not going to be a spiral now? This is probably the wrong one. Anyway, this is one of his mangas. They're very long. And he does have a Frankenstein one. Actually, anyway, it doesn't matter. Because anybody that reads Junji Ito, if you read his manga or if you watch, there's an anime on HBO now, he uses spirals all the time in his work. And for him, I was reading online because like, why is this guy doing this? Why am I thinking the circular ruins or spirals? And he thought like, oh, well, to him, spirals are the representation of infinity. So that's why he likes to incorporate them in his work in very disgusting and grotesque ways. So that was, again, like, I'm building this connection that Borges would not have known of. He was not alive, I don't think, when Junji Ito was starting his career. But again, I think that's to his sentiment of the right reader has to come along and you have to bring in all of those experiences with other works of literature or lived experience, whatever. And then you are breathing more life into this story that Borges would not have been able to figure out. Not because he was stupid. He was not stupid.
I love that so much, Joey, because we have talked about the Library of Babel, right? And all of those mirrors, reflecting mirrors, and it is infinity. So just what you said and our own experiences with his literature is that there is an infinite number of combinations of readers who are going to come to this with their own lived experience. Maybe you really do love to look placed by AI. AI, quote unquote, knows everything, but feels nothing. It's not going to say, you know what this reminds me of? I don't think it's going to have those echoes through experience of people in time and space because it doesn't have a sense of time. It's all just right now. I don't think it has a sense of time. And so that's just something that's been really a lot on my mind of like what makes us human, what makes the act of reading and talking to people about literature and art, and what is that for? Is there a point to it? And for me, I'm like, yeah, it's the point of life, but not everyone would possibly land on that same answer.
I mean, there's an infinite amount of answers to that question, probably. It's different for everybody else. It could just bring you joy. It could, bring you fulfillment and satisfaction in some way. You could do Oscar Wilde aestheticism, where it's art for art's sake, and it's because it's beautiful, and that's all that matters in this case. So it could be for so many reasons, but I think that goes back to the story. It's like, what is the motivation behind this random dude who's like, I want to create a man? He has no memory that he was created in this same way. So what's his motivation other than to be a creative person and create something? Is something that will last. We don't know why. Where is he coming from? Like, why is he not in a circular ruin? Or is he coming from another circular ruin? But then, like, why are all of these other people around? Are these all other dreamed men or people? I'm assuming he's also meaning men as in, like, humankind and not literally only men, like cisgender men. Because, but I guess then they're reproducing asexually, sort of, so it doesn't really matter. You see all these weird threads that were just like, what is this? What is this? What if this is what that means and this is what that means? Yeah.
And Joey, I love that you took it there because it reminds me of, we have read some science fiction, which is not always my jam, and we read Bloodchild, right? And that was where the men are forcibly impregnated and babies come out of them, right? So I would never, prior to that interaction with that story, compliments of you, would it ever have occurred to me to expand my mind to be like, well, what would the world be like without women? What would it be like if the roles were reversed? What if we just had one gender that spontaneously replicated and there's just two of me here? Everyone's worst nightmare. I understand that. But it is one of those just interesting questions of the playfulness of going back, especially to the theme that we're exploring this month, June of Art. What drives the creative impulse? And in this particular story, he said he had rough drafts. He's like, this thing wasn't quite what I wanted, so we're going to throw those all out and we're going to start again. And so I think that, it speaks to being a writer who is not afraid of the blank page and being like, okay, I'm going to give this a go. And it's like, okay, that didn't work out. You throw that one in the trash and you start over. So it's that continual fountain of imagination and drive. And there's some creative spirit that's like, the spirit is just here and you can either latch onto it or it can go to the next person who's gonna be like, I had this idea about creating a dream of a man, but then I'm gonna make him real. It's like, yeah, somebody else had that dream. You better get working on it because time's a ticking.
Yeah, and actually, as you were saying all this, I was like, maybe from what Jennifer has been saying throughout this episode, that maybe I know his motivation. And maybe it's because he wants to be challenged. Because you're talking about what are the different, we were just talking about what are the different reasons people want to create art. And you had mentioned that he threw out all his other rough drafts because they were all yes men. And so he was like, I need someone to challenge me. And that art can absolutely, this is a story that will challenge you. This is a type of art, and it will certainly challenge
Borges to give you this sentence, and you'll be like, yeah,
Perfect.
that's what he's trying to say. So and this is another two-parter. So the first sentence is, asleep or awake, the man thought over the answers of his phantoms, did not allow himself to be deceived by impostors, and in certain perplexities, he sensed a growing intelligence. Part 1. Part 2. He was seeking a soul worthy of participating in the universe. So I think his drive was, I want to be challenged as a person by another person's essence, soul, intelligence, creativity, all those permutations of what that person is, right? None of us are the same. That he was like, that's what I'm going for. And I just love that you brought this up, and we'll probably have to like put the quote in here somewhere, what Borges said about like waiting for a piece of literature comes back alive when the right reader experiences it. And he doesn't mean the smartest reader or the fastest reader or, a certain type of reader. It is, if that clicked for you in that moment, you have kept my spirit and my story alive. And I just really love that as a feeling of infinity.
Yeah, there you go. Bring it right back. That is that's immortality then. That's
Nailed it.
Yeah, because if you can keep your literature alive long after you're dead, and I think Borges will be read forever, as long as people are on planet Earth, I don't know why they wouldn't want to read Borges. But yeah, I think, again, to underline that he doesn't mean a special type of reader. He means like the idiosyncratic reader. Do you like this? Then you should read it.
I made this for you. I just didn't know it was for you, but it's for you now. Or it's the you that you will be 10 years from now when you read this again. And then you're like, how, as you would say, how was I sleeping on this? I can't believe that for a whole decade passed and I didn't jump on this.
Yeah, I think Borges is one of those authors that you can revisit time and time again and be like, I think about that. I feel that way about Clarice Lispector as well, where I'm like, damn, I'm going to read this in like 5 years and I'm going to be like, holy shit, this is even better. Or maybe I'll be like in such a different headspace. I'll be like, this is really not for me. This is not my jam at this moment in my life, but maybe in 5 more years, it will be my thing again.
Do you think it might spiral back, Joey?
Forever and ever, as long as I'm alive. Obviously, I can't live forever. But yeah, it's interesting. So much of his philosophy on art and on literature in particular is reflected in his work. And I think sometimes we will say like the authorial intent is not really necessary to understand. And I still don't think it's necessary for Borges anyway. I stand by that. But I think if you're curious in what Borges said in a nonfiction manner and reading about his thoughts on poetry and prose, that I think it will really enrich your experience. Well, at least it enriches my experience because I'm like, oh, that's what he was talking about when he said that. So you should.
Yeah, Joey, and I love that you said it was in his nonfiction work. So he was like, let me tell you some things about the way that I view the universe. Like he's just like giving a lecture, right? Literally, he is giving a lecture. And this is some transcriptions of him lecturing about his work. And then he was like, okay, now that I've told you about my work, why don't you just go read my work? Because I told you some other things in there that I alluded to, but I did it in much more beautiful, flowing, literate kind of way instead of just a straightforward, ever be a straightforward discussion with him.
Even in his lectures, they are beautifully crafted. And I don't know that he actually ever I think he might references his own work, but I don't think he encourages people to read his own stuff. He definitely does it for other authors, including Oscar Wilde. But yeah, I'm sure that he would be like, well, if you're already ready to explore literature, why don't you pick up a copy of my short story collection? He's trying to make a buck too.
He was not very good at the commercialization of his work, and that did cause him a lot of consternation later in his life, which again is not what we're talking about on this episode, but it is, I do not feel that he was a self-aggrandizing person who was like, hey, everybody, look what I wrote. He was like, the people who can appreciate this will find it when the time is right, and I created it, and that is all I can do. I'm done with my part.
Yeah, he genuinely seemed to have just loved literature and wanted, and just knew, like, I'm pretty sure he's read every book that had ever been written. And just like was like, where are you pulling that out of, Borges? But yeah, I think he was just genuinely in love with literature and wanting other people to also fall in love with literature. Not unlike us. We are Borges. We are your Borges
Are the
now.
spirit of it.
Oh my goodness.
That we do want people to be like, oh, look at that luscious sentence. Like, do you feel it? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, try a different one, or maybe try a different genre, because I think we both do light up when we are talking about literature and our favorite characters and debating things amongst ourselves. And that's our goal. So if we are inhabiting a little bit of the spirit of Borges to say, read wildly, love passionately, and experience all there is to experience out there, then we are living our extra literary affairs ethos.
When you said that, I immediately was like, oh, I wonder if Borges would have a sign that was like, live, laugh, love.
No. He's not going to have that one. He's going to have like, read, love, write, or love to write and read. There would be some combination of that there. But I think love was important to him. He was rather unlucky, I think, in his romantic endeavors. But obviously,
Borges.
he left us with this beautiful legacy that, as you said, will be around for a very long time. And I'll leave it at this, Joey, because we are going to be focusing on some visual arts. We're not going to look at sculptures. I don't think. We're not going to say, oh,
I
here's
was going to
this play.
include sculptures.
You are?
I do love sculptures too.
Okay. And the reason I mentioned this is that I was speaking to somebody and we were talking about things that came down from antiquity. And statues, exactly. She's like, where, not all their books survived, but their stone carved marble representation of the idealized figure, we still have those did not get lost. I mean, some of them got destroyed, but it was also when we were thinking, 100 years from now, 300 years from now, outside of our lifespan, will people be reading physical books? Will it all be electronic? Will it be an implant in our brain that we now have perfect recall of everything that has ever been written or thought or said or spoken? Like, who knows what that's going to be? But like a physical object, as long as we're not annihilated by nuclear war, will still exist. Anyway, it's just something playful to think about.
God willing.
Yeah, global annihilation is always an important topic for me to explore.
It's knocking on our door these days. Okay, do you want me to wrap? Okay.
Yes, this is a perfect place to wrap up, Joey.
Love that. Okay, so thank you for watching today's episode or listening. If you're listening to this as a podcast, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and follow us on TikTok at Extra Literary Affairs. I almost said .com, not .com, but you could go to extraliteraryaffairs.com if you really wanted to, because it's real.
You sure can. Awesome, Joey. That is great. What will we be talking about next week?
It's called The Unknown Masterpiece by Balzac.
Awesome. All right, Joey. I will see you next week. Looking forward to it. See you then. Bye.